Welcome to the History AI podcast, where the past comes alive with facts, anecdotes, and a dash of humor. Here are your hosts, Chuck and Marco.
Welcome back to the History AI podcast. I'm Chuck.
And I'm Marco. Before we set sail on today's epic tale of revenge and piracy, let's hit some quick housekeeping. If you love the show, and we know you do, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop us a 5-star review. It's the best way to help us keep the history coming.
And a huge shout out to my old roommate Rob. Thanks to his insanely generous donation, we're officially funded for another year. Rob, you're a legend.
Seriously, Rob. And hey, if you want to stay in the loop, follow us on social media. We're always posting updates, episode teasers, and behind-the-scenes stuff. Links are in the show notes.
Alright, now that we've got that covered, let's dive into the story of a woman who turned the English Channel into her own personal battlefield, Jeanne de Clisson, the Lioness of Brittany. Before Jeanne de Clisson became the terror of the English Channel, she was actually living a pretty cushy life as a French noblewoman. Born in 1300 into the wealthy, influential Montaigu family, she grew up with all the privileges that came with being highborn: estates, servants, a fancy education.
And like most noble women of the time, her life was mapped out for her early on. She married her first husband, Geoffrey de Chateaubriand, when she was just 12 years old. Yeah, I know, 12. That was pretty standard back then. They had 2 kids together, but after a decade of marriage, Geoffrey died. Jeanne was just 22 and was young, widowed, and still very wealthy.
But she wasn't single for long. Enter Olivier de Clisson. Now, Olivier was a powerful Breton nobleman with serious connections. He was known for his military skills and his loyalty to the French crown. The two married in 1330, and for a while, life was good. They had several children together and seemed to be the picture of noble stability.
But this was the 14th century, and Europe was a powder keg. The 100 Years' War was ramping up, with England and France going at it over control of French territories. Alliances shifted like sand, and loyalty was a dangerous game.
And here's where things start to unravel. In 1342, Olivier was sent to defend Vengeful, a key Breton stronghold. The French lost, but Olivier was captured and eventually released by the English in a suspiciously quick prisoner exchange.
And by suspicious, we mean the French crown thought Olivier might have made a shady deal with the English. They started whispering that he'd betrayed them, that he'd sold out his country for a safe return.
The French king, Philip VI, was especially paranoid. He needed a scapegoat to show his nobles what happened to traitors, and Olivier was an easy target. Despite shaky evidence, he was arrested, tried, and found guilty of treason.
And when we say tried, we're talking a sham trial. The king didn't even give him a fair chance to defend himself. Olivier was dragged to Paris, where he was publicly beheaded in 1343. His head was then mounted on a spike and displayed over the Porte de Nesle, a chilling warning to anyone else thinking of switching sides.
And if that wasn't brutal enough, the king also seized the Clisson family's lands and declared them enemies of the crown. Jeanne, now a widow with young children, was left with nothing but rage and a burning desire for revenge.
And here's where the story really takes a turn. Jeanne could have fled. She could have tried to appeal to the king or married another noble for protection. But instead, she did something no one saw coming: she decided to fight back. And not in a courtroom or a political arena. Nope. Jeanne was about to declare war on the French crown, and she was going to do it with blood and cannon fire.
So Jeanne de Clisson is staring at her husband's decapitated head mounted on a spike in Paris, a gruesome, gut-wrenching sight. But instead of crumbling under the weight of that horror, Jeanne decided to channel her grief and fury into something unprecedented.
And let's pause here for a second. We have to remember, this was the 14th century. Women, especially noble women, were expected to mourn quietly and maybe, at most, petition the king for mercy or restitution. Jeanne did none of that. Instead, she did what any good 14th century noblewoman would do if she were, completely unhinged and out for blood. She sold everything she owned.
We're talking estates, lands, jewels, all of it. She liquidated her wealth to fund what would become one of the most infamous pirate fleets in history. Jeanne bought 3 warships and had them custom painted black, with blood-red sails. This wasn't just some aesthetic choice, it was psychological warfare. She wanted her ships to be seen from miles away, a floating omen of death.
And Jeanne wasn't just playing dress-up as a pirate. She went all in. She recruited a crew of hardened mercenaries, men with nothing to lose and a taste for blood. These were battle-tested killers who were more than willing to follow a woman as long as she paid them well and promised them revenge.
And she delivered on that promise. Jeanne named her flagship My Revenge, not exactly subtle. And her mission was laser-focused: attack French ships, sink them, and kill everyone on board except a few survivors who could spread the word. Jeanne wanted her reputation to do as much damage as her cannons.
But her tactics weren't just about bloodlust. Jeanne was meticulous and strategic. She knew that direct assaults on French naval ships were risky, so she targeted merchant vessels, disrupting trade and supply lines. This wasn't just about personal vengeance, it was about hitting the French crown where it hurt, their economy.
And keep in mind, she wasn't operating alone. Jeanne made a strategic alliance with the English, who were more than happy to have a rogue privateer wreaking havoc on French waters. They provided safe harbors, supplies, and intel. Jeanne became an unofficial English asset, a French noblewoman waging a personal war against her own country.
And let's talk about her tactics for a second. Jeanne wasn't just blindly attacking ships. She'd fly false flags to lure in unsuspecting vessels, pretending to be a friendly ship until she was close enough to strike. Once they were in range, her crew would raise their black and red colors and unleash hell.
And if you're thinking, well, maybe she just wanted to loot and plunder like a classic pirate, think again. Jeanne wasn't in it for the gold. She was in it for blood. She'd execute every French sailor she captured, except for 1 or 2 survivors, whom she'd send back with a very clear message: tell King Philip VI that the Lioness of Brittany is coming for him.
And she kept this up for 13 years. 13 years of terrorizing French shipping lanes, burning ships, and killing crews. And through it all, she had her 2 young sons with her on board. Think about that, raising kids on a pirate ship while waging a one-woman war against the French crown.
But after more than a decade of bloodshed, Jeanne started to feel the weight of it all. By then, her name was infamous throughout France and England. Her vendetta had consumed her, but it had also made her a target. She was getting older, her crew was growing restless, and the political tides were shifting.
That's when she decided it was time to step away. But not without one last act of defiance. Jeanne sailed to England, where she married an English nobleman, Sir Walter Bentley. She settled down, quietly, in relative comfort, a dramatic end for a woman who had once ruled the seas with a blood-soaked fist.
From noblewoman to widow, from widow to pirate queen, and finally to a retired wife of an English knight, Jeanne de Clisson's transformation was nothing short of epic. And yet, despite her violent campaign, her actions forever changed the perception of what a wronged woman was capable of. So, by now, Jeanne de Clisson has gone from grieving widow to full-fledged pirate commander. But what did those 13 years actually look like? Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of her reign of terror on the English Channel.
First off, Jeanne wasn't just some rogue pirate running amok. She was a calculated, tactical force. Think about it, she had 3 custom-built warships, each one painted black with blood-red sails. The flagship, My Revenge, was a floating weapon, armed to the teeth with cannons, crossbows, and a crew of hardened mercenaries.
And Jeanne was no passive commander. She was actively involved in every raid, leading her men into battle. According to some accounts, she was right there on deck, sword in hand, barking orders like a seasoned naval captain. And for a woman in the 14th century, that was practically unheard of.
Now, Jeanne's main target was French merchant ships, vessels that were easier to attack than full-blown naval warships but still carried valuable cargo. But here's the thing, she wasn't in it for the plunder. Sure, she and her crew took supplies and weapons, but the real prize was vengeance.
Her strategy was ruthless and deliberate. Jeanne would use false flags to approach French ships without raising suspicion. She'd pretend to be a friendly or neutral vessel, lulling them into a false sense of security. Then, once she was close enough, bam! Her crew would hoist the black and crimson sails, signaling that death was near.
And Jeanne didn't just take out the ships. She made every raid a brutal, unforgettable spectacle. Survivors from these attacks reported that Jeanne showed no mercy. Most of the captured crew members were executed immediately. Some accounts claimed that she personally oversaw the beheadings.
But Jeanne wasn't just a mindless butcher. She always left one or two survivors to carry a message back to King Philip VI. That message? The Lioness of Brittany is still out there, and she's not stopping until she's satisfied. This wasn't just about Olivier's death, it was about making the French crown suffer, over and over again.
And if you think she was just some rogue operator, think again. Jeanne was a master of political alliances. She cut deals with the English, who were more than happy to let her disrupt French shipping. The English provided safe harbor for her ships, allowing her to resupply and repair without fear of capture. They essentially gave her carte blanche to continue her attacks as long as she kept targeting the French.
And let's talk about those attacks. Jeanne's raids weren't just random strikes. She was systematically dismantling French supply lines. Every ship she sank meant fewer resources getting to French ports, fewer goods reaching the French military, and more chaos for King Philip. This wasn't just personal vengeance, it was economic warfare.
And the French crown knew exactly who was behind it. Jeanne became a living legend, a ghost story told to merchant captains and sailors. They'd say, "Beware the Lioness of Brittany, if you see black sails on the horizon, it's already too late."
But even the best pirate can only rule the seas for so long. As the years dragged on, Jeanne started to feel the weight of her campaign. She was getting older, and her crew was growing restless. The English alliance was also getting shaky, with shifting political winds making her position more precarious.
And here's where it gets complicated. Jeanne had 2 young sons with her throughout all of this. Imagine raising children amidst the chaos of a pirate fleet, constant violence, rough seas, men drinking and fighting. And yet, Jeanne managed to keep them safe, even while waging her personal war.
But by the mid-1350s, Jeanne was ready to move on. She had spilled enough blood, sent enough messages, and burned enough ships. She decided to sail to England, where her old allies welcomed her. There, she married Sir Walter Bentley, an English knight with his own complicated history in Brittany.
And just like that, the Lioness of Brittany retired. From pirate queen to English lady, quite the pivot. She lived out her remaining years in relative obscurity, far from the blood-soaked decks of my Revenge.
But even after her death, her legend lived on. Jeanne de Clisson became a symbol of relentless vengeance, a woman who refused to be a victim, who took on a king and held a grudge for over a decade. The French crown never officially acknowledged her actions, but sailors and merchants continued to tell tales of the black-sailed ships and the bloodthirsty widow who commanded them.
And that, folks, is the story of Jeanne de Clisson, the Lioness of Brittany. A woman who turned her grief into a weapon and made the seas run red with French blood.
So Marco, what's the takeaway here?
Jeanne de Clisson was a woman who turned tragedy into a mission. She refused to be a victim and instead became a force of nature on the seas.
And she proved that even in a time when women were often sidelined, they could still strike fear into the hearts of kings and captains alike.
Absolutely. Jeanne de Clisson wasn't just the Lioness of Brittany, she was the avenging queen of the Channel.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thanks for sailing with us through the story of Jeanne de Clisson. If you liked today's episode, give us a 5-star review. It really helps the podcast grow.
And don't forget to check out our new merch. Link in the show notes. You can also suggest future episodes by hitting us up on social media.
Until next time, stay curious, stay fierce, and keep making history.
She always says I'm never losing. Got blood to bleed and I'm not choosing. She had to fight when they attacked her, but now she's back and she's not scared. All the crew are rowdy and fired up. They're tired of taking it on the chin. One by one they're not losing steam. They're running into the eye of the storm, and she says no more running away. Where running away. No, no more running away. We're not running away. No. From across the water, they're coming, they want her, but they'll never get her. She's got 10 men and a small boat, but they don't know